Right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to MCD Live. And I'm so glad to be resuming it today after about, I believe, a whole week. And so you have been attending MCD Live for the past 1 week, but I have just joined in today after about a week, I guess. So I have come up with something very interesting today as as we have been talking about regulation, decision making, and responsible decision making. Um, I thought maybe we should talk more about how we can regulate ourselves when we are in a state of stress, when we are in a state of overwhelm. Um, because unless we have regulated ourselves and kept ourselves in place, kept our minds in place, we won't be able to make better decisions. We won't be able to take responsible decisions. So it's very important to check in with how you are feeling and what is going on here, what's going on here, what's going on with your decision-making ability. And before we start off with the session, I would like to ask all of you about something. Um, if your brain had a battery percentage, what would you think it would be? You can type it in the chat box. How would you describe that um, battery percentage of your brain, of your mind? How would you think is it? I would like to see some answers from your end. And once you answer, we can move forward with our discussion. Because my battery percentage, okay, that's 50. It's okay, that's great. And you said 80%. I mean, that's great. Okay, Gina just said 50%, and that's like half, right? So you could be one of the very few who are fully charged, almost fully charged in yourself. I would say I am about 40, somewhere between 40 to 45%. But yeah, I'm glad to see okay, 30%. Whoa. I mean, yeah, that's low. That's quite low. So some of you have low, some of you have somewhere, I'm also somewhere in the half part. I am also 45%. All right. So the thing is that we're all at a different energy level, right? Some of us are running very low. Some of us are in the middle, like me and Gina. And some are fully charged. But there will be rarely anyone who would say I'm 100%, right? Sometimes even our mobile phones don't have the capacity to actually stay 100% for long. Now, that's actually important because most of us are not starting the day from zero stress, right? Even before we get off from our beds, we are carrying things before the day even begins, right? There would be so much going on in your mind before you come up from your bed that to some extent it does affect your energy levels. Today, we will be understanding your internal system and your brain, your nervous system, your attention. And one of the main skills that we are going to build today is something that we can refer to as regulation, rebooting, and regulating, right? There is something I've usually referred to as the impossible Tuesday. It's not a real day, it's more like a pattern many of us usually live through. You wake up already tired before your mind has even fully settled. Your phone is the first thing to become active when you wake up in the morning, right? There would be messages, there would be emails, there would be reminders that you might have set up on your calendar, right? And there would be so many expectations from you even before you get up from your bed. There would be something that is unfinished from yesterday and it is still sitting in your mind, and something apart from something that is already unfinished from yesterday, there is another urgent task that has taken birth for you today, right? So you have unfinished tasks from the day before, and you also have tasks for today, and those tasks are urgent tasks. You know what happens when there is a situation like that? Without even realizing it, your brain starts feeling full before the day even fully starts, even before the day has properly began. And then you sit down to work, to think, and to plan. Some of us, we would start writing a to-do list. We would start writing reminders in the calendar. Some of us, what happens when we try to do that? Instead of that actually helping us, we freeze. We just freeze. Um, it becomes impossible to even start doing anything. And your ability to do anything at all, your ability to start a task, it just feels blocked. Because your mind is constantly telling you that there is so much to do that it becomes even hard to start something, right? Now, it's some of you may think that you have become lazy when it happens, or a lot of you, it's something that happens for days. Some people, they create to-do lists and it becomes hard to carry it out or complete that list even for days and even for weeks. And you end up in further stress because you think that you have become lazy, and there is something terribly wrong with you that you are not able to follow a basic to-do list even. So what happens at the end? It's You start blaming yourself. You start calling yourself things. You start calling yourself a failure. A lot of people, they use terms like failure for themselves because they're not able to complete very basic tasks because you are overloaded. You don't understand why it's happening, but it's happening because you are overloaded, right? And it becomes hard to notice this state of being overloaded, and it is easier for you to start judging your own self for it, right? So we need to understand what is happening at that point. So when there is a lot of stress, when this levels of stress increase, your brain activates a survival response. And where does this response start from? It starts from the amygdala. I think so, till now, we have been able to understand how the amygdala works and how the prefrontal cortex works, right? We have talked so much about it from the beginning of our sessions. And by now, we understand that the amygdala is the part of our brain that we refer to as the alarm system because it activates alarms when there is something wrong happening, or if it detects something wrong could happen. So the amygdala is the alarm system of our body, right? So it protects us by detecting threat around us, in our body, around our bodies, right? But the problem when it comes to amygdala is that it does not differentiate between actual danger, a danger or a threat that actually exists, and something which is barely a psychological pressure, right? It cannot differentiate between the two. So if you have a deadline, a conflict, or a financial stress, let's say, you have to pay something back to someone, or there's an emotional tension that is going on. What happens is that all of it gets registered as a threat by your internal system. It gets registered as a threat. So, what do we do in such situations? We shift into survival mode. We get into a survival. Our attention starts to get narrowed, right? You may not be able to pay attention to something as basic as someone talking to you about how your day has been. You may not be able to respond to them. Your emotions, sometimes you may just be very, very hurt by something someone may have said, and it may not be actually very offensive, but it hurt you because your emotions basically intensify when you are in a state of overload, right? And you become unable to um, think clearly, right? And what does that do to you? When you're not able to think clearly, it affects your decision making. It affects your emotional regulation. It affects your interaction with people. So this is where we again we have talked so much about the prefrontal cortex. Our prefrontal cortex is the part of our brain which is responsible for our for the planning and reasoning and the decision making and even emotional regulation, right? As we talked about the amygdala as the alarm system of our body. You know what is the prefrontal cortex? The prefrontal cortex is the thinking brain of our body. It's the thinking brain of our executive function or the executive system, right? It helps us regulate our executive functioning. And when you are under stress, what happens to the prefrontal cortex? What happens to it? It becomes less accessible. It becomes, far from us when we are in a state of stress. So what it does is, since the prefrontal cortex is far from our reach, we become confused because it's a thinking brain. So what happens? We start procrastinating. We start avoiding things, right? So it is a natural response to stress, right? We start judging ourselves for it, but all of these things, when the stress overloads, it automatically affects the parts of our brain, right? So in moments like these, what do? You start developing a small space for yourself. Like, um, you can start saying that I notice that I'm overwhelmed, even though it may feel very difficult at that point to say that. But you tell yourself that I notice that I'm overwhelmed. And I notice that my thoughts, they are speeding up. When you are in that state, there would be thoughts coming from here, from here, from here, from here. And there's so much bombardment of thoughts that it gets very difficult to notice anything at all, right? So in that moment, what do? You tell yourself that I notice. You tell yourself that I do notice what's going on. I do notice my thoughts. You don't control your thoughts. The problem arises when we start to control our thoughts. Something that we cannot completely control or take hold of. Previously in our sessions, we have continuously discussed how we need to let our thoughts sit and leave once they have spent their due time, right? So we need to let that be. We need to regulate our body. We need to regulate our reactions. Okay. So let's do a small mindfulness activity. Let's just a second. Here we go. All right. Just a second. All right. Okay. I want you to keep your attention here for a moment and keeping the past 2 weeks in your mind, I want you to think of any moment or any time that you felt overwhelmed. You felt like you were overloaded with too much. You know, not just the task overloading, but all the thoughts overloading you of the tasks. What's worse when it comes to tasks making you feel overloaded is the thought or the thoughts that are coming along with those, right? So you need to think of that moment. when you felt very overwhelmed, right? And you felt overloaded. What was going on in your body? What was going on at that time? Just think about it. Your internal experience, in short, what was going on in your body internally when you were overwhelmed? You can write about it in the chat box. I will be able to read it. And just try to notice what was happening. Just try to think about it. What was going on? Just look at it for a moment, for a minute, and share what was going on at that point. You can share it in the comment box. I'll be able to read your messages. And if you feel like not sharing, you can just keep it with you and just notice it. Just notice it for a while. And try to think, simply notice. Don't change it. What did your body do at that time? Was there any tightness in your chest? Any heaviness? Any restlessness? Your heartbeat increasing, becoming dysregulated? Are there any Was there any brain fog at that moment, in that moment where you felt overwhelmed? Was there any state where you felt like you were shutting down? Where it felt like you were just losing yourself? You can share it if you want to, and it's completely okay if you don't feel like sharing it. You can just notice yourself in that situation. Because, most people, when they are under stress, then they have a lot of stress, they don't ever notice it clearly. They don't even get the chance to notice what's going on, right? So the first step towards a situation like that is to notice what's going on. It's to look at what's going on, right? So just think what was going on at that point. And stiffness and brain fog, very, very common responses to stress. Absolutely. Thank you, Bhakti. With the exhaustion and a feeling of I just want to do anything kind of freezing. Yes. Just like I mentioned in the beginning, when things like overloading happens, what happens to you? You just freeze. You're not able to do anything at all. You feel like it's very hard to even begin something. Just a bare minimum task. You're not able to implement it or even carry it out, right? You just freeze at that point. You able to understand what happens at that moment is the first step. Is the first step to get out of that phase, right? Now, let's talk about something very relevant to this, which is window of tolerance. Window of tolerance is basically a range, the range where your nervous system functions very well. It functions to its fullest. So, what do we call it? The window of tolerance. Now, inside this window of tolerance, you can think clearly, you can process your emotions, right? And you can actually respond properly without reacting abruptly. So we all have a window of tolerance where we can actually be fully functional and very well functional. Now, in this window of tolerance, it is different for each one of you and for me and everybody. Some of us can hold this amount of stress in our window of tolerance. Some can't even hold this, right? That's why we always say it's different for everybody. It's different. A feeling is a state of, you can say a situation may feel very overwhelming for one person, but very less overwhelming for the other person because we all have different window of tolerance, right? Now, let's say If something happens and the stress that I get from that situation, it goes beyond this window of tolerance, what happens? You become you enter the survival mode. You become this you enter the survival state, right? Now, one is you can say the hyper arousal. I'm talking about this because you mentioned freezing, right? Now, one is the hyper arousal. Hyper arousal is when you become very anxious, very restless, and you start overthinking to no limit. You start thinking about things that it may feel very uncontrollable at times, right? And you become very emotionally reactive. Even if someone says something very, very, not offensive at all, you may become very, very defensive at that. You might snap out at them, right? So one is that state. The other state is hypoarousal. Hypoarousal is where you freeze, where you shut down, where you disconnect, where you feel numb, where you feel foggy, as you mentioned, there is brain fog, where you feel unmotivated. Demotivated is one thing. Unmotivated is when you have absolutely no motivation to do absolutely anything, right? You're like, okay, there's this much tasks waiting for me to be done with. Let them be. I don't want to do them. And what happens at that point? You may feel like, yeah, again, I'm failing, but these are your body's protective responses, right? These are just responses trying to protect you. Now, when you are outside of your window, you are usually completely inside the experience. You are pulled into the stressful situation. You are being pulled into the stress. At that moment, you step back and tell yourself that I am in a stress response right now, because at that point you keep telling yourself that I cannot do something. I'm failing at these things. I'm not able to do this. I'm not able to do that. But at that moment, push yourself to tell yourself, I am in a stress response right now. And give yourself that pause, that space, that gap before you start reacting to the things that are coming in your mind, to the words that are coming in your mind about yourself. So, yeah. So at that point, pause, reflect, and think. When you become very overwhelmed, just imagine that, just like we imagine the situation when we were overwhelmed. If you rethink that situation, if you go back into that situation and you pause and you breathe, you take a deep breath in and you take a deep breath out. And think and tell yourself that I am in a stress response right now. And none of those labels that are coming in my mind define who I am. Would it make a difference? Would you be able to think better at that point? I want you to take this into practice, okay? Notice your body, because regulation happens when we start moving from just thinking to practicing. So just sit comfortably right before we move towards, yeah, disorganized. Sorry, I couldn't read before. Disorganized and not able to think. Yes, that definitely happens because there is so much so that it gets very hard to organize. As I told you, your prefrontal cortex, it goes out of sight. And our prefrontal cortex is the part of our brain that actually manages our executive functioning, right? So when it's out of reach, you won't be able to complete any of your tasks. There's a phrase that a lot of basically neurodivergent people use when they are struggling with executive dysfunction. We call it that I don't have the spoons to do it, right? I don't have the spoons to do it. You may say they may mean they don't have the energy, they may not have the motivation, whatever it may be, right? So we usually say it like, I don't have the spoons to say it, do it, right? So it definitely does affect your prefrontal cortex, and that's why it happens like that when you're in a situation like that. So moving forward towards our activity at the end, it's a short mindfulness activity. Just a second. Okay, so just I want you to just think right now, okay, and just imagine, because just focus on your breath. Just imagine you are in a just a second, my internet connection has. So, all right. So, where did we go? Yes. Am I visible to everyone now? All right. So, just inhale slowly through your nose. Just try to breathe through your nose. And take a small extra sip of air at the top. Just try to, you know, like this. And then exhale slowly through your mouth. Repeat it with me for a few times. Inhale through your nose. And just a few sip more of air. And now exhale. Once more. Let's do it once more. Okay. So inhale through your nose. And exhale from your mouth. Just pause for a moment. And we will do it once again. Just a second. Just take a pause and breathe once again. And just sit for a moment and just notice again what change do you feel in your body? How do your shoulders feel, and how do your jaws feel? And how is your breath? When we are in a stressful situations, our breathing becomes very dysregulated. Or we don't notice, we start breathing rapidly, and it really affects how we breathe, and we are not able to notice that until we consciously look towards it, right? So you are observing your internal experience without actually interfering with it. Would you be able to share how it feels once you do this mindfulness activity? Would you like to share it? I would like to read how it feels. I would definitely like to know how it feels for you whenever you are giving yourself the time and space to pause, to breathe, and actually give yourself the space to regulate yourself, to reboot yourself before you can actually um before you can actually do anything or move forward towards thinking of doing anything. How does it feel when you actually pause, when you breathe, when you give your body the space, when you give your mind the space and relaxed? Yes. I feel quite relaxed when I do it, to be honest, because my battery, when it was 40% in the beginning, whenever I do meditation, whenever I do mindfulness activity, it kind of jumps to, if not 100%, which is very unrealistic to say, it does go to somewhere between 70 to 80 to 85% for sure. And it every time I give myself the space to relax, instead of jumping onto doing this and doing that, it does really help in the short term. And when it becomes a practice, it becomes helpful in the long run, right? So it's very important to do the brain dump, right? Because our brain is not meant to hold endless open loops, right? Our brain is supposed to process. It's not supposed to store that stress, right? So just think about whatever that may be going on in your mind, the task, the worries, the reminders, the responsibilities, as we discussed in the beginning. Just look at them. Just bring it on to, you can open your notes application in the phone, or you can take a paper and write all of it down and mention everything that is going on in your mind. I'm worried about my tasks. I'm worried about my work tasks, my personal responsibilities. Mention it all down, right? And just look at it. And you know what you do at that point? At every time when we get thoughts like these, our mind basically creates different interpretations. And those interpretations that we discussed, I am a failure, I cannot handle this, everything is going wrong, these intensify your stress. And they feel true at that point, but they are just stress-based interpretations, all right? And they're not your objective reality, right? And in that moment, mindfulness plays a very important role, because instead of believing every thought that is coming to you immediately, you learn to notice. You learn to look at it. Like, I'm having the thought that I can't handle this, right? I cannot handle this. That one shift, when you say that I'm having the thought that I can't handle this, instead of saying that I can't handle this, you can say, I'm having the thought that I cannot handle this. You define thing as it actually is, rather than your mind telling you as it is. Your mind is telling you you cannot handle this. You are telling your mind, I am having the thought that I cannot handle this, right? So that one shift, it creates a distance between you and that thought. Now, let's think about this thought. I'm failing, right? And I can't handle this. You can tell yourself that I'm having the thought that I cannot handle this. But is it reality based? There's no evidence that there is a reality behind this thought, right? So you can rethink of these thoughts in a more balanced way, right? I am having a thought that I am a failure, or I am failing, right? But there is no evidence to support this thought. I'm having a thought that I am not able to handle this and everything is going wrong, but there is no evidence to support this, right? So you are just not getting absorbed in those thoughts when you tell yourself these things. This is mindful thinking. You are thinking mindfully. You are reframing what you are getting in your brain, right? So let's think about it as we try to wrap up the session. Uh, I want you to open the chat box and complete this sentence basically. Whenever I feel overwhelmed, I will. And complete the sentence from your end. I want you to do it. I want you to complete the sentence. Whenever you feel overwhelmed, what will you do? You will speak it like, whenever I feel overwhelmed, I will. Now, I will take a break. I will take a break and I will practice deep breathing. I will think about it and I will challenge what I'm thinking rather than controlling what I'm thinking. So I want you to mention how would you do it in the future in case you are overwhelmed? What would you do? I want you to share it in the chat box. Yes, conscious regulation makes one feel neutral, to calm, to recharging. Perfectly right. Helps write thoughts on paper to visualize, and self-guilt and self-sabotage can be reflected upon, and we can come back to the center. Absolutely right. That's the goal behind taking a break. That is the goal behind pausing and reflecting, because it helps us bring our brain back. All right, Yusa said, I will go silent, relax, and take a breath. Absolutely. Sometimes just taking a break and relaxing and just becoming silent and breathing helps more than we can imagine anything else could work like. So yeah, I do this. Every time I'm overwhelmed, I become silent. I choose a place where nobody would disturb me, and I would just close my eyes and practice deep breathing. And it could be for an hour, it could be for 2 hours, it could be for a day. I can even, it's perfectly fine as long as there are no uh, you know, um, life-threatening consequences, that you take a break for a day, you take a break for 2 days, you just give yourself that space where you can relax instead of thinking too much about how you're going to get done with the tasks. Don't think about the tasks at that point. Calm your body down. Relax yourself before you move ahead with your tasks. Would anybody like to share anything? Or then we can call it a day. When I get overwhelmed, I get up and take a mini walk, be the window or nature. Take a mindful walk. Yes. You can practice mindfulness anywhere, anyway, anything that could make you feel away, make you take you away from that stressful moment. Whether it's a walk, whether it's looking outside the window in the nature, sitting in the garden, playing with your pets, um, sitting around trees, um, listening to the birds sing in the morning, or going for a walk at night. Anything could help. Deep breathing doing that. Change of scene does make a difference. Yes, absolutely. A lot of researchers say that when you change your location, when you move from a stressful situation to a different situation, it does bring a drastic effect on your mind. It does impact how you are able to handle things moving forward. A lot of people, when they go through difficult life circumstances, they actually, you know, they take a break and travel, right? Traveling could be taken as an opportunity for mindfulness. You go to the mountains, sit there, practice mindfulness, and listening to relaxing music. So, so healing. That is so therapeutic. Absolutely. It's also very therapeutic when you are in a state like that. But when you are doing all of these things, you have to make sure that that you're not thinking about your tasks, right? These are going to help you when you stop thinking and focusing on what you have to do, because you have to regulate your own self before you move forward to those tasks, right? So these are amazing ideas, amazing ideas. Nature, walking, deep breathing, giving yourself that silent space, relaxing music. All of these things could be very helpful in regulating that feeling of overwhelm when it gets out of, when that stress gets out of your window of tolerance. So it's very important to practice what feels good for you. So I think we can call it a day today. I will see you tomorrow in our next session of MCD Live. It was amazing having all of you here today. So I hope to see you all tomorrow. All right, so or the Nini said, nature is healing the awareness of something much huger than yourself. Yes, very important point. It has the capacity of healing uh, the inside. It has the capacity of healing you. So that's a very, very important point. Nature is in itself something that can heal us in ways we cannot imagine, right? So that's absolutely right. Thank you so much. All right, see you tomorrow. Same link, same time. Bye bye.